Hello, welcome back to another Pen Talk. Thank you very much for tuning in and following me as I explore the amazing, incredible, interesting wide world of pens. And you see two in front of you on a rotating turntable being held up by crabs that are very, very worthy of this honor that I bestowed upon them. This is the Asvine P36. I'll explain why I have two. I've watched a few reviews of the pen, and they've all been fairly positive, in fact, sometimes very positive. So I was very enthused about getting a P36, so I ordered one. Asvine has said they were going to send me one when they had the improved version, but I didn't know when that was going to happen, so I ordered it. And then about a week later, I got the new and improved P36. It's a subtle improvement, but certainly a well-engineered change. So we're going to watch them twirl around. They do look nice. That titanium brush finish is very, very nice. I certainly prefer it to a shiny chrome. Brushed stainless is also good, but titanium just has a slightly different color to it. So the crab are going to give you a winky wink, and we're going to dive in. For the few of you that may not be familiar with the Asvine packaging, if you order it with a box, this is what you get. I like the fact that there's a little cutout here so you can open up this outer sleeve easily. You slide out a nice protective plastic box. Asvine there in the corner, pops open. You get a nice instruction manual and the pen in a nice plastic condom, slides out, and voila. Very well packaged, and also it can be giftable this way. So the difference in these two pens is this is the original version. As you can see, the cap band does not cover the end of the cap. In the new version, the cap band covers the end of the cap completely, and they added a nice little thinner cap ring here above it. The engraving is also a little bit more refined, as you can tell with the P36 on the other side. So I'm impressed. That is a relatively minor change. I'm not aware of any cracking issues here, and I have a ton of acrylic pens, some with no cap bands at all, and I've not had any cracking issues here with turned acrylic. I've had injection molded pens, which I'm certain we've all experienced. They sometimes just crack sitting in a drawer, but turned acrylic seems to be very stable, strong material. And that's not a subtle change, even though it looks like it. So you have to, number one, find a contractor to make these cap bands for you, maybe the same one that made these. You got to change your machining on the lathe to accommodate the way the cap bands are different. But it's just a very, very nice change. I think aesthetically it works well. And I do prefer the look and also the functionality of this new cap band compared to the original one. The pistons are the same. As you can see, the original one is just slightly down more than the other one. And I'm certain if I took these apart and played around with them over and over again, I could probably get the piston a little bit further up, but for that minute amount of ink difference, it's not worth the effort. The other thing is you'll see is the original one, the nib lines up underneath of the clip. I can't get that to happen on the newer versions, but that's probably just the luck of the draw. The threading, it's double threaded, so they're in two engagement points. If you go to the other one, when you finish turning, the nib is facing down. And for the new one, it's the same type of double threading here, so the nib either faces to this direction or to this direction. But very nice pens, great weight, great feel. Ergonomics are excellent. I love the look. Really nice, impressive looking pen. So here we are with the P36, disassembled as much as I'm going to disassemble it. Yes, we could remove the piston, but why? But I do pull the nib and feed, and it pulled out very easily. Did not unscrew. even though it looks like there is a nib unit there, but I think it's glued in place like the section is glued to the barrel. But what I have here, these two barrels are exactly the same, but the caps are different, as we will talk about in more detail later, or have we talked about earlier. And this one has an Asvine extra fine nib, and this has a Bock extra fine nib, so we will definitely compare the writing experience between those two nibs. The feed is slightly different, but it's still a injection molded plastic feed. So besides the nibs being different, this nib collar is different between the Bock versus the Asvine nib. The Asvine nib is on the right, this one here. And as you can see, there's a flat piece that runs all the way from the end to end of that nib collar. If you look into the Bock one, you'll just see a little ridge there at the back, which fits into that slot in the feed. So you can't get them confused, but they are different. So you just can't swap a Bock nib for an Asvine nib without also swapping the feed, which is the thing I would do. And you may ask, why did I pull the nib and feed? Well, to make certain they're thoroughly cleaned in soapy water and a rinse of water and a wipe with a paper towel. Because I've learned over my many years of using fountain pens that no matter where the pen comes from, it's always good to clean it before you ink it. Well, you might ask, how would you clean it out if you didn't want to remove the piston? What I would use is a hypodermic type syringe like we have here now. Nice blunt end. And that will fit into that little opening where the nib and feed were into it. And as you can see, it extends into the barrel. And you could just flush with water. And I find that to work very, very well when I've cleaned other pistons like this in the past. It certainly is a much more efficient and effective method rather than pushing up and down the piston numerous times to flush water in and out of there when you're changing inks, let's say from a red to a blue, where you don't want any color contamination. So that's the combination. Syringes are available in many places, Amazon, eBay, etc., for your use. So this is the ink I decided to use. I haven't used this ink much recently. Probably not in well over a year. But when Aurora came out with it, people were really excited, but then that seemed to have died down quickly. This is what it looks like from wiping off, not this color, but this color, wiping off the top of the jar. It is certainly on the black side of blue-black. So this is how much ink I got with the first pull. And I'm obviously going to drop the piston down and pull up again to see if I can put more Aurora blue-black into the pen. As we can see, that second fill is as close to about 100% as you're going to get. But if you don't want to go through that, you can always just pull the nib and feed and use a syringe that you would use for cleaning, which I showed earlier, and use it to put ink into this barrel, ensuring it to be very full. But I'd also pull up ink through the feed and nib so that gets saturated, because when you put in a cartridge or do an eyedropper or whatever, a decent amount of ink has to be used to fill that feed and nib section. But everything has its pluses and minuses, just depends upon what you feel is more important. So let's look at these two nibs a little more closely. And we're also going to look at their writing sample, but they are very similar. More similar than what I expected. But when we look at the writing sample, we'll see how similar they are when they're putting ink on paper, which is the real critical test of a nib and whether you'll like it or not. The engravings in both I find very nice, acceptable. But the nib is really for writing, so that's what we're going to focus on, the writing. So one of the first things you'll notice between these two nibs is the Bock Extra Fine is definitely finer than the Asvine Extra Fine, and also is a drier writer by a fair bit. The Asvine is slightly smoother, which is what you would expect with a nib that's slightly wider, even though when we looked at the nibs up close, I didn't think they were that much different, but I'll need to review the video and do some magnification to see if my eyes deceived me or not. If you like extra fine nibs, the Bock nib is definitely the way to go, because it is definitely extra fine. The Asvine Extra Fine veers towards the fine category, but I do like it, and I'm generally fine to medium to broad in my liking of nibs. But I got the extra fine Bock because, number one, I thought it would be a little soft, which it's not. It's extremely stiff. Feels stiffer than the Asvine Extra Fine. Some of my medium and broad Bock nibs are slightly softer than like a Yovo nib, but this is not the case with this particular nib. And as we know from some other YouTube reviewers that have gone into depth on nibs, regardless of who makes the nibs, there's a fair amount of inconsistency, both in line with and the feel of the nib on paper, from nib to nib, even though in theory they should be the same. But that's the fun part of fountain pens. It's like a box of chocolate. You'll never know what you're going to get until you put that nib to paper and write with it. And depending upon the ink and paper that you're using, will also vary the experience. Ah, the joy of fountain pens. So one of my viewers commented about, I guess you kind of gave up on Bino pens in 2023, and I'll say absolutely. I held out for as long as I could. I do enjoy buying pens. I enjoy doing videos and sharing them with you, but if I'm not buying pens, then I'm depending upon pens being sent to me, and sometimes I don't get the pens sent that I might really enjoy owning, adding to my collection. Here's a recent pen that I have invested in from Cyprus. I'm blown away by the look. It's a fairly large pen. I'm very much looking forward to receiving it. They sent me an email saying that they were having a typhoon and they couldn't ship it out in the day that they wanted, so it'll be delayed a few days, but wow, I'm just impressed at customer service. And I'm also looking at this V1 pen, and there's also some interesting pens out. Here's some screenshots of those pens. So one of the things about the fountain pen world is there's no end to pens that might interest you. They certainly do interest me. Hopefully you can find one that you really enjoy. So now it's time for the wrap-up, and we'll show you the dimensions of the pen and the ink capacity as I measured by weight of an empty pen, and the one here I have filled with ink. I didn't fill up the other one all the way. I'm going to decide on which one I'm going to keep inked up. Right now I'm leaning towards the Asvine Extra Fine nib versus the Bock, but we'll see. And we're going to just look at this one a little bit more closely. The cap comes off in 1, slightly over 2 turns, which is not a little much, but I don't mind it. Nice fine threads there, and as we talked about, it's double threaded, so there's 2 engagement points. The clip is functional from a spring-loaded viewpoint. That nice little end there slips over stuff very well. But what you can notice, the edge around this clip on both of the pens has a little bit of sharpness to it. Not something I think you're ever going to experience. It doesn't, detract from the use of the pen, but just be aware that it's there. But to me, that sharp edge just delineates that shape and aesthetic look of the clip more than if that edge was rounded. All the parts fit together extremely well, great tolerances, and I can't imagine it to be easy machining titanium and machining acrylic and make certain everything matches up, threads, diameter, dimensions, etc., etc. So kudos for Asvine for putting together this interesting combination of materials. They're not the first to do it. but they've done it well, which is the more important part. The other thing to note is that it fits extremely well in the hand, feels very good in the hand. That section is fairly concave, but you can move your fingers around, which is what I like to do when I write. You don't really feel those threads much at all. They are certainly not sharp. There's no step up. So as a writing instrument in your hand, it feels great. You may ask, does it post? And I think you know the answer to that. Yes, you can put the cap on the end. It certainly backweights and changes the balance, to me, in not a positive way. It's not fully secure, but if you need to put the cap someplace while you're writing, you can put it at the end. And it just misses being on that blind cap, but I don't want to ever turn a cap that's posted onto a pen anyway, so that's the way it goes. So let's do a final look at these nibs writing. I did work on the Bock Extra Fine. I flossed it, I smoothed it, I did everything I could, and marginal improvement to the writing experience, much to my disappointment. The Bock Extra Fine does write better now, more consistent line. It occasionally seemed to get ink starved before I did my work on it, and as you can see, the line is slightly darker than my original writing up here, and you can see it kind of looks like, you know, shading, but really it just gets ink starved at certain strokes. And here you can see the Asvine Extra Fine and the Bock Extra Fine, much difference. But it's now more usable. Still not a favorite nib of mine, but at least it's better than it was. Yes, here's the nib that I worked on. So what did we learn in this review? Well, the Asvine Extra Fine nib is certainly not quite extra fine, especially in comparison to the Bock, but it is much smoother, lays down a nice pattern of ink, consistent writer, certainly wetter than the Bock even after a lot of work on the Bock nib. And it's the same ink, same paper, same pen. The only difference is the nib. And also the feed is slightly different, but I don't think it's a significant difference between the feed between the two pens. Hopefully you've enjoyed this little look at a pen that I think is very, very nice. Certainly attractive, certainly functional, feels great, looks great. What more can you ask for? So we've come to the conclusion of this video. I hope it finds everyone safe, healthy, and happy, enjoying your pens, having your pens encourage you to use up some ink, to put some ink down, write journal, sketch, doodle, whatever. That's what they're for. So I want to thank all of you for watching. You can hear how smooth that nib is. And may you have a great day. Hopefully this video has added some enjoyment to your day. Let me know in the comments. This is the end, and we will say bye. Enjoy your pens. Yep. Lift the nib up, it won't write.